Alrighty, so we are live today with crew and the rest of the group. Thank you everybody for coming to the EKC Construction Technology webinar series. Today we will be talking winning work with a data strategy in construction, the new non-negotiable. So that's maybe a little bit of a fancy way to be saying we're talking about data in construction, and we have just the right people here to share more about it. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the group to introduce themselves. I'll just go through my list that I see here. So let's start first with Barry with crew. So take it away, Barry.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. This is a super fun conversation that we've been excited for. So I'm Barry, the CEO of Crew. My background has been on the developer side, working with, different multifamily developments, industrial developments over my career. At Crew, we're focused on solving the data silos concern and problems that the industry is facing. And trying to help people in the industry really get a good take on what it means to have data strategy is something that we always care about. And so as a data management platform for construction, that's been our number one focus. So really excited to be talking about data strategy and all the fun stuff with data with this group today.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry. Let's go next to Josh.
Yeah, my name is Joshua Wyand. I'm the Director of Emerging Technologies here at Suffolk Construction. My data background is working as a business analyst at Austin Commercial in past life, and at Cash Construction, which is a Mostech company. I was the business intelligence manager there. So I spent quite a bit of time in automated reporting, working on data structures and helping out with data strategy there.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Really good to have you on. And I think you're a repeat guest on here. So thanks for coming back. Let's go next to Omar.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Hello, everyone. I'm Omar, a data engineer, Power BI developer at Oregon. I joined around 2 years ago with a mission to build our data department and lead the company's data strategy. Uh, Basically, focusing on developing dashboards, pipelines that provide really critical insights into our projects and financials, working closely with executive teams, ensuring data drives decision making at every level today.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Omar. And then last but not least, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Worley. I'm the head of data here at Crew. In the past life, I've worked a lot in construction and the built environment in general. I was the data manager at Trubeck, leading their data team for a couple years, building ad hoc reporting, AI, web apps, that sort of thing, all built around finding value within construction. Then before that, I was actually in the structural engineering industry, so touched different sides of the building process. Very familiar with using data in the built environment. Very excited to talk more about that today.
All right, awesome. So this is a great lineup. I'm excited to dive in to the discussion. But before we do, for anybody who's tuning in on LinkedIn or YouTube, just be aware that we are able to see any comments and questions that you have. If you put them into the chat or the comment box on whatever platform you're on. So especially for the viewers on LinkedIn, please do feel free to use that comment to let us know any thoughts or questions that you have for the group here. There's a lot of expert insight, so we do want to hear from you. We do want to respond to your questions. So yeah, stay engaged. So with that, I'll dive into just kind of a broad question here, and maybe this is a good one for actually, any of you. But what does it mean to have a data strategy, and especially for contractors who really aren't familiar, or anyone in AEC who's not familiar with data strategy? Like, what does that really mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
go for it, Omar.
good. Well, for me, I think a data strategy is really important for the efficiency and productivity for the team, for risk management, insights, project optimization, and I think using the data to support business goals, especially especially in construction right now, we do have a solid data strategy that ensures all PMs, finance team, the executives have the right insights at the right time. And I think without a solid strategy or any data strategy at all, teams would keep relying on manual processes, inconsistent reporting, or and outdated data.
Yeah, and just to maybe add on to what Omar is saying, I'd like to point to like a couple of things. One is just a quick stat, right? 9 out of 10 projects today in construction either go over budget or have schedule delays. And that really speaks to the importance of having a data strategy in this industry. Ideally, you would love for that to be zero. But the way to get there and to really mitigate a lot of these risks that Omar was mentioning is really being able to measure your projects, right? What I like to tell everyone is you can't fix what you can't measure. And the way to
Mm-hmm.
measure is to have a data strategy. That's as simple as it gets. And so, how do we help everyone in this industry take advantage of all the different project data sets that's available to them through the software that they use, whether it's a project management software, the ERP software, scheduling tools, safety software, even your sales pipeline software, right? How do we make use of that to have a really strong foundation for your data strategy to win more, to do better, and to deliver projects better?
All right.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, more like for me, it's just being able to answer in a cohesive and more importantly, scalable format. How are you going to be collecting and managing data? How are you going to be ensuring security and governance? How's it going to be coming into your organization and being properly cleaned up and vetted? And more importantly, leveraging that to be able to drive those decision-making processes in a scalable manner. The last thing you want is one uh, process or book that's tied to a specific employee that's very niche the way that they've always done it, and that person leaves and now you're crippled. That's not a strategy, that's reliance on a particular person. So it's taking away from that, moving to a scalable format, and putting processes in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
And I
I,
think I think there's lots of use cases that we can really share together like before and after having data strategy, like how again finance teams manually pulling numbers from different sources to compare budget and actual costs, and safety entering their incident reports manually, making it really hard to identify patterns in safety issues for subs or safety rates, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of to
I
what,
oh
sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, kind
Ryan.
of to what Omar is saying about yeah, data strategy, and I think it's important to highlight here that while it's very important to have a data strategy and put things in place, it's going to look a little bit different for every company, and how you begin that, and what sort of information matters to you. Every company does things a little bit differently, and while
Mhm.
having a data strategy is very important, it's important to get those people in the room and talk about, okay, what does data mean to us? How are we going to use it to drive value for our business? And that's, yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think on that point, Aaron, if you don't mind me adding a little bit
Oh,
more to this
go for
conversation
it.
for that piece, I think I think everyone's in a different spot in terms of buy-in from an organization, right? Obviously, like Suffolk and Oregon are completely data-driven organizations that are forward-thinking about that. And I'm hopeful that today's conversation, and for those of you tuning in today, you'll be able to get some insights into actual uses for your data and how you communicate that to your team, whether it's the executives or your colleagues, because ultimately, right, it's about getting that organizational buy-in. And that's what's going to really
Mhm.
get you a strong data strategy where you're not just relying on just one person that's building everything, but it's the entire organizational culture that's driving that strategic approach to building a company. So I think that's a key element to having a data strategy.
Yeah, I think what I tuned into maybe the most, Barry, I like the way you put it with like, yeah, it's how you measure, right? And there's so much information that happens in construction that no one person can ever capture. And the data strategy and structure that we're putting in place in our organizations, it's basically acting as our tape measure, right? When you pull tape in the field to see how long something is, you use your data strategy to measure the information that's coming back from the field that you can't necessarily quantify in any other way. So that's kind of how I'm making sense of it from this discussion. But yeah, great opening. So I mean, let's dig in a little more. So why is it? I mean, we talked a little bit about why is it important, but like, what are some specific use cases as well that really drive value for contractors?
I can talk high level, but would love to hear what Josh and Omar have to say from their respective companies. Because I think everyone here just wants to get some more specifics, right? Like let's get into it. I think what we see with a lot of the customers that we work with is really connecting the dots between your project management software, your scheduling software, and the ERP software. Those are the basic data sets that tie into a Project Hub dashboard in which you can look at the status and progress of all the projects that you're working on. That's one of the most common use cases that we see, and also the easiest for someone internally to show ROI on their data to the executive team. But we'd love to hear what Omar and Josh have to say on the specifics of that.
Yeah, a big thing is predictability and transparency, right? Having a finger on the pulse of your projects, of your company, having that level of insight is critical. And yeah, something you can't necessarily have whenever you have, uh, again, a poor data strategy or no data strategy. A big thing right now on everyone's mind is AI readiness. How are you prepared to take on the AI world? And if your data is all over the place, it's not connected, it's not in easily parsable formats, you're going to have a hard time getting ready for that AI driven approach. If your data's all over the place, then the model is going to be all over the place. You want to make sure that those are clean, tightened up, and that will enable that data or that AI readiness piece. The other part, again, is the reporting part. That's something that's been heavily used for a very, very long time. So when you have an industry that's as segmented and as construction, where every single project's almost like its own subsidiary, you want to make sure you have that ability to have the insight at the
Mhm.
project level. How are they performing? What's their burnout like? And every single project's going to be a little bit different. Every single company's going to be a little different, and only you are going to know what analytics are going to be best for you and your company. So it's important to focus on what's important. All right, now how can we collect that data in a scalable format, and how can we present it in a scalable format?
Thanks for sharing that, Josh. And as you were sharing some of that, we got some good reactions in the chat. So thanks for that. And another reminder to the audience, if there's anything that like you're excited about, you're hearing, feel free to comment and share some thoughts with us.
Yeah.
Omar, anything to add to
Yeah,
like use cases and things that you're seeing as
yeah.
well?
One thing to add, like based on what Josh said, there is that like before data strategy, subcontractor selection was based basically maybe on past relationships or subjective feedback rather
Mm,
than data. But now, like us, for example, we evaluate contractors based on different metrics like on their on-time delivery, on their quality issues, their cost overruns, and safety. So we can track their how many incidents they've got on past jobs, for example, their EMR rates. So this really helps everyone on making better decisions going forward, looking for new subs, using the data. And same thing with safety and the sub being compliant with the regulations. And it really helps project managers, executive teams to for schedule decisions and efficiency.
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's a real monetary impact for several stats, right, Omar? Like tracking your safety on a job site, being able to calculate TRIR and EMR, that's all going to impact the bottom line with respect to how much you're paying for insurance.
Exactly.
So those are all legitimate use cases and data points that absolutely should be tracked if you want to move forward with delivering a project better, but also in a way more safe manner because safety is number one on any job site. And I think something about kind of having that performance data of the subcontractors on a job site kind of makes me think about some of the value in cost data, right? From an estimating standpoint, how do you look at all the jobs you've estimated in the past? How do you look at how those jobs turned out from a final budget perspective and where things shook out? And then how do you estimate that for the future? Right? A lot of that's going to be driven by having that data in one spot, being able to analyze it. And the way we like to think of it is just having it all in a data warehouse, which
Yeah.
I know we're probably going to get into later on a technical side of things. But there's actual use cases for that performance and cost data that really has resounding, and significant consequences for the project.
Especially
Yeah.
pre-qualification of trade partners. That's an awesome point.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one theme I'm seeing here over all of these use cases is kind of combining data from different sources and kind of viewing things in a holistic manner, whether it's safety or trade partner validation, all of that sort of stuff. It helps to have everything in that single source to come up with those metrics and make sure you're using a data driven approach in order to make the right decisions.
Yeah, I really like the examples that are focused on safety, like in particular, because I feel like that's a really easy, relatable, high value, high impact metric
Hmm.
or, thing for us to improve in the industry. And like I come back, I think Josh, you had mentioned like predictability on the projects. And it's like, yeah, if you're seeing the same safety observation get flagged over a period of time, but you don't have any means of like actually tracking it, you're not going to be aware of a recurring issue potentially that could lead to something that is, a negative event on your site. But if you actually have the visibility into those trends and say like, hey, like why has this safety observation come up, every week in the past 3 weeks, like let's actually have a targeted toolbox talk about, what our data is telling us. It helps, control for the outcomes that we want to see on our sites. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
I think like same as you just said. Like for example, if we see lots of fall related injuries on common across multiple sites, like we can really implement training programs to reduce that risk based on what we're seeing. So it does help in multiple ways.
Yeah, a perfect example. I know lots of folks like real world situations. So, company I was at, they had lots of incidences with cuts in the hands, especially around like fixed blade knives. And the answer wasn't, well, let's just get rid of every single knife on every single job, right? And we need them for construction. But instead, we were able to just take a step back, figure out a way to approach it from a tactical standpoint. And the answer was, oh, well, there's these retractable blades that we can use. As soon as you let go, the blade pops back. Let's leverage these across our projects. We were able to see a third reduction in cutting incidences within the first month, and that led to about a tenfold decrease over the next couple months. So one example of how, again, the data is not going to tell you, hey, you need to eliminate all knives, or you still have to take that and make the decision based off what you're seeing. But a perfect example how that happens.
Yeah, great story. Thanks for sharing that. And I kudos for the team for like figuring out that whole thing and finding a way to improve it effectively. So, yeah, great to hear. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. Barry, you had kind of teased out like data warehouse and like some of the more technical stuff. Do you want to maybe like start expanding on what is a data warehouse for some of those who may not be aware?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off the discussion on that.
Yeah.
And we've obviously been talking about having real-time reporting and analytics, being able to track performance on the job site. But the method in which you can actually make that reality is through data pipelines and data warehousing. Now we have obviously an awesome group on this call to talk about all those fun technical aspects of data pipelines and data warehousing. But that's really the key focus of getting a data strategy up and running that's scalable, especially for the long term as we're thinking about all these AI discussions in the background. You absolutely need that data strategy in place before you can have that AI strategy. But happy to let the others chip in on specifics of data pipelines and data warehousing.
I think that's just a great discussion, especially talking about common pitfalls companies face setting up warehouses or pipelines.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a common pitfall, sorry to jump ahead, I know that's also on
Oh,
the
all
agenda,
good.
is
No, no, please. Yeah, dig
yeah,
in.
trying to I do get the value in building reporting. That's what everyone sees and that's what you use. That's how you can really drive value. But if you start to build out all of your reporting functionality before you have pipelines, before you have a warehouse, it ends up being a very non-scalable process. It's a lot of CSV exports. It's a lot of Excel. Things get really messy. It's hard to build that data-driven culture when it's just not yeah, it's opening a can of worms before you have the backbone and to support it. And yeah, that's why a warehouse is so important. It's scalable. It is that single source of truth for all of your various systems, your project management, financial, scheduling, HRIS. And that can really drive a lot of reporting value downstream in a scalable manner. Um, that's really the value I see.
And I guess for all the listeners that are tuning in today, it probably is helpful for us to actually define what a data pipeline is and what a data warehouse is. Um, but yeah, if someone wants to take a stab at defining that in a super simple way.
I can maybe summarize like data warehouse is where you put all the data and can pull it from, and then your pipeline is how you feed your warehouse. That is an extremely simplified way of stating it. I would love to hear someone a little bit more technical kind of restate that though.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, the best layman way I can describe it is that the ingestion piece, whether it's IoT devices, whether it's APIs or your ETL or whatever, that's going to be the pipeline. So, however, data is going to be getting into that warehouse, then the warehouse, obviously being a structured data for, like a structured data place where you're going to be storing it, whether it's a Snowflake style or if it's a lake or a Mart, right? Those are data mart. Those are all examples of where data is stored in a repository.
Okay. Anything else to add? We do have a question that's come in from our audience members, which I do want to share. But anything else on pipelines and warehouses? Okay, awesome. So we have a question from Matt, which I'll show on the screen here to make sure I get it right. So question for Matt from LinkedIn. So thanks for coming. We're working at consolidating data into a single source. Then the idea is to hand that to AI. Obviously, AI will help build us reports much faster, but what about finding new patterns and insights? Insights that traditional human analysis doesn't reveal. Anyone have thoughts on what might be possible on that front? Has anyone seen AI revealing new insights? Really great question.
Yeah, awesome question. Great to see you, Matt, on this call, tuning in. I would say for in response to your question, I think the first piece is to make sure that you have those foundational data infrastructure pieces in place, right? You could have all these data silos, you're pushing to a single source, but also making sure that the schemas actually are defined so that when you're using the AI on your data warehouse, you actually are pulling the correct information from the correct sources. So I would say that's probably the first step in that AI equation. I do believe that we're gonna get to a point where you could just have you know that data warehouse connecting all your dots and then having a way to analyze that way faster than a human could, and even surfacing insights that you may not be able to capture. I think we're truly entering an era where it can recognize patterns that we may not have thought was possible because it can catch inconsistencies, it can catch trends, but only that is possible with a warehouse and pipelines. But I'll let the others chime in on this as well.
Yeah, I've played around with a few AI insights tools, and at least whenever I used it, it was pretty good at trying to find correlation between things that like were not related at all. I think a common thing we hear all the time is, oh, uh, the ice cream sales relate to the number of drownings, but the reality is that it's summertime, people are eating ice cream, and people are also swimming. So whenever I've done AI like KPIs, I'm just like, that's not helpful at all. I have yet to see it, but also I haven't been using a lot of different systems lately.
Yeah, I think that contextual layer is super, super important, especially for an industry like construction, where we have so many ways that a job can be impacted. And so being able to look at the correct tables from each data source, being able to piece the things together to have a response that actually makes sense. That is going to be what I think we're going to get there soon. I don't think we're quite there yet today, but that's exactly why I think we're all on this call today. Is like how do we deliver the correct data infrastructure for the companies out there that want a data strategy? What are the things they should be thinking about? What are the pitfalls they should be aware of? so that everyone could be positioned for that AI wave where we could start to be more thoughtful about the analysis and find patterns that we couldn't have found ourselves.
The context is a big thing. Construction is also comically nuanced. Reading data one way and then recognizing, oh, that's a it may be interpreted differently based off of contract type. And so looking at it through that guise, it's a little different than how you would interpret it. So in my mind, having the context and having the know-how, I don't think AI is there yet, especially with how nuanced construction is and how much publicly available information AI can train off of. So all the more important reason why it's nice to have construction specific folks to help you and help you interpret that.
Yeah.
Comically nuanced. Yeah. I love that.
I,
Yeah.
So true.
I do agree with Josh. Like construction data in specific is really like often unstructured. So just pulling all that data into one single source and pushing it into AI sometimes really won't give you what you're looking for. You need to make sure like one of the common pitfalls is making sure data cleaning is there. I mean, in construction we have lots of missing data in fields or the text types or basically anything that comes unstructured into a warehouse.
Yeah.
All right.
I think at Crew, AI has definitely been top of mind for us. Something that we're thinking about. How do we drill down into these warehouses, these lakes that we're creating for people to be able to reveal that insight? And I think something we think about a lot is transparency with AI. I think that's one downfall that a lot of the models today they won't tell you how they got to a certain answer. They'll just spit something out and say like this is what I think, this is what's right. I think when we
Mhm.
do try to breach AI, I think being able to provide that transparency as to why or how they got to that answer is going to be very important to make sure that the
Yeah.
people who are using that output to make a decision know why how it got there and can kind of fact check that and make sure that based on their experience this is how I want to proceed or this seems right. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know. We're kind of throwing away that human element and that human experience if we're
Mm.
just starting to rely on AI
Hmm.
to make decisions off our data.
Such a good discussion. Ryan, I'm glad you mentioned lakes and warehouses because that ties into pretty perfectly one of the questions that we also just got here from Sam, which is what's the difference between a data lake and a data warehouse?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a real quick analogy that I like is that I like the concept of libraries. So where a data lake is like handwritten notes, books, magazines, all sorts of just random things all over the place. And still like some schema, still some elements to them, but a warehouse is meticulously organized, cataloged, placed in specific places. They're using the Dewey Decimal System to get everything in place. It's just easier to interpret, walk up, find what you're looking for versus a lake is just a lot of parsing.
Unstructured versus structured. Exactly.
Wow.
I like
Yeah,
that
that was the
analogy.
perfect analogy. Nice.
Yeah, that's the first one. I like that one a lot, Josh.
Thanks.
Yeah, I like that one a lot too. Super relatable. Dewey Decimal versus just a hodgepodge of stuff in your library. Cool. All right. So I think we've touched here and there on some of the pitfalls that companies might encounter when they go to set up their data strategy. What else is there, that teams should look out for that are maybe red flags or like, hey, like really don't go down this path or just be aware that this could not be the best type of thing when you go to do your setup? Like, and if there's some really specific examples or experiences, I'd love to hear them from the group.
Yeah, I can start. One of the most common pitfalls, in my opinion, that I think is really important is data architecture, choosing the right storage and the approach to that. For example, as we were just talking, a lakehouse versus a warehouse. Like with construction data, it is unstructured. A lakehouse can store both of these and then work your way into a structured and scalability. Um, Common pitfalls like lots of companies start into building a lake house, doesn't take into consideration the growth they're going to get into, in the future, which is going to cost them a lot of money to go back and optimize things.
Mhm.
Uh, Poor data mapping between systems, relying on legacy systems, just leading to misaligned cost codes or duplicate vendors or mismatched structures between projects, for example.
I would
Y-
say for me, the biggest pitfalls I've seen is just not starting with the end in mind, and not being methodical. So like a lack of data management, data quality, no data governance. Everything's all over the place, lots of siloed data, but also just not clear objectives. What are you trying to get? What are you trying to do? Because a lot of times it takes a long time to build out very, very good lakes and warehouses. And so if you start with something that's not important, if you start with something that's irrelevant, or you have this wishy-washy end goal, you might be picking systems that are not going to be helping you, and then having to swap is expensive. You're starting to balloon up cost, and then ultimately you're in this uncomfortable situation where you may need to spend quite a bit of money to move
Mm.
systems or architectures or schemas or something along those lines. And so again, I can't stress enough, what are you trying to get? Is it AI readiness? Is it automated reporting? Then work backwards from that. What are the KPIs I'm looking for? Are those integrations even supported? Ask yourselves those questions before trying to dive in and spend all this money.
Really good takeaways. Let's see. So, I'm always curious to know as well, like if you guys are able to share, Josh and Omar, like specific approaches on how to get that right when you are saying, okay, I know what I want to solve, and you're approaching and trying to figure out like how to actually get to a clean data lake, a good warehouse, and get that set up. Like, what practical steps are you taking to go from point A to point B?
Yeah, yeah. For us, I mean, it all started once we just got together. We found like we're really missing on some problems, some jobs, and just thinking about incidents, safety, compliance for subs and partners. So we built our data strategy just focusing first on integrating all the information from different sources to provide real-time insights that can empower all of these decisions for finance execs and project teams. Uh, how we started that is we've implemented a lake house architecture that integrates different tools we use from Procore, CMIC, Consensual, Velocity into one centralized, scalable data environment with the partnership of Crew. Um, they streamline our data ingestions from multiple tools into Fabric, and this Fabric feeds just directly into our lakehouse, and that's where we really built our Power BI dashboards, focusing on providing all these insights to different teams.
Okay. Thanks,
I'd
Omar.
say I'd say a big thing, going back to that, you know, what I just said about starting with the end in mind, is what are we trying to do? And a lot of times I've seen companies, they'll slap together a couple dashboards, they'll throw together a couple KPIs,
Hmm.
and no one's really looking at it. And so the first part you got to ask yourself is, well, how am I ever going to overcome this resistance to change? How do you get people to care about something? And sometimes it's making it
Hmm.
around SOP. You got to look, got to check out the dashboard. You got to, answer response on this number, or you have to put something that they care about in there. And how do you know what they care about? Well, you have to ask them. You have to ask the executives. You have to ask the committees and the teams. And then once you find that out information, you're able to build something that people actually want to look at. They want to partake in. And then once you are building that out, then you'll start to get awesome feedback like, hey, that number doesn't seem right. Can you look into this? And you start to refine and continuously make what you're trying to work on better. You start consolidating. Instead of having 20 dashboards, maybe you have like three or four that are very, very relevant. And again, that's the big part. Relevant. How do you make it matter to that person? And I
Hmm.
can't stress that enough. That also goes for whenever you're trying to get executive onboarding for some of these expensive things that you're trying to do, and expensive softwares you're trying to get to help build out your data strategy. How do you get executives to buy into this plan? Well, you got to sell up. You got to get them to see the value, understand what you're trying to accomplish. It's the exact same thing, different flavor. But the more you can continuously get people on board with this idea, then it starts to infect culture. Once the culture is infected, it becomes a part of your day to day. And once it becomes some part of your day to day, now everyone's the decision maker. Everyone has the capacity to make changes and influence the company in a positive way. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one of the biggest struggles we had at the beginning, just making sure, getting the team used to going to the Power BI, looking at data, and understanding the story to connect them.
Yeah, my takeaway there was give the people what they want, like what they care about, and that's how you get good interaction with your data and people invested in putting in data. And we're getting some comments as well. So Sean has shared a thought: just because you can doesn't mean you do. So thanks for sharing that, Sean. And then we also have a question that just also popped up, I believe, from Javal. Let's see if we can share this. So integration, interoperability across solutions, and collaboration among stakeholders throughout the project lifecycle are critical. This makes CDEs a goldmine of project and asset data that AI can leverage. How do you see data ownership and platform adoption evolving in construction tech? What's Crew's take on this? Great question.
Yeah, solid question. I would say, for the common data environment being a gold mine of all this project data, absolutely. And, I think the way we think about it is data security, confidentiality is number one for any of our customers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
everyone owns their own data, right? The warehouse, the lake house, that's the customer's data is how we view it at Crew. And so when you think about adopting other software to add to your tech stack and to get more data sets, all of that's just going to go back into that common data environment in which you own, and then you can leverage AI tools on top of that. I think we talked a lot about the importance of getting to that point, and then how do you get to that point. But I think a lot of interesting discussions that we hear nowadays is, okay, let's say you do get to that point, what's next? How do you make that data more actionable? And I think that's where AI can really come into play, giving recommendations, suggestions on top of your data beyond just visualizing it. So I think that's really the next step here, and kind of tying it back to an earlier part of the conversation today, which was, how do you actually get really interesting insights from that? And I think that all comes back to let's have that data infrastructure set first before you can think about that. So really hoping that, for those of you tuning in today, you're able to take away at least, getting that data strategy and data infrastructure down first, and then you can leverage that gold mine for a lot of cool things.
Yeah, I
That's
look at a lot of construction tech companies every single year, and a big thing that I always look at is integrations, and how can you make it easier on my end users to not have to do duplicative entry. And a big thing that also comes up is how secure are those integrations. And oftentimes in integration testings, we'll see that it's not that secure, and other competitors' information can potentially be at risk in that integration. So it's important to test those, validate them, and get that sign off.
Yeah, absolutely. I always, as a side note, like to see sandbox environments so you can do that testing in somewhat of a risk-free zone. So keep that in mind as well when looking at pretty much any tool or new solution that you're pursuing in construction tech and going through your tech stack. I think that also ties well into the whole AI tools that is just kind of exploding on the market today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point you
Yeah.
brought up, Aaron, on the sandbox. I think that's
Mm.
really, really important to have for any new software that you're evaluating to add to your tech stack, because that gives you the chance to play around before you push anything to production, where things actually matter. So, really good point you brought up there. And something that we always look for too when we find other partners to integrate and connect data with.
Hmm.
If it's API based, does it have a sandbox? If it's on-prem, we can definitely work with that. Although I feel like the trend obviously these days is finding a cloud provider versus something that's on-prem. But I think ultimately it's like, can they deliver a sandbox environment for safe testing?
Thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah. So I think integrations, as Josh said, very important to remove that duplicative entry. I think one thing that we at Crew work a lot with are software APIs and being able to access your data through the back end or the back door of any sort of software that you are using as a construction solution. People are starting to really see the value in that and having that common data environment. And I think if you were to look back maybe 10, 20 years ago, the demand for that isn't quite so high.
Hmm.
All of these software companies are really building out very comprehensive APIs now that we're able to tap into and make sure that you can get any sort of data that you can see in the front end of your software solution, also in your data warehouse. And that's something that I worked a lot on with Omar and other customers as well, just making sure that they have everything on the back end and they're able to take down those data silos and combine that with other information that's relevant to their company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I
uh,
actually want to just add one more thing, Aaron. I
yeah,
just want to
yeah,
make sure
yeah.
like everyone like fully gets that. Like, make sure that your data, whatever software solution you're using or evaluating, that they're not commingling your data with other customers' data. I think that's super, super important. Just ask the question, like, are you like separating our data somewhere else, or is it being commingled? Because you don't want that commingled. That's your data.
Mhm.
So I think that's something that at least for those in the audience should ask.
Yeah, yeah, having that multi-tenant environment that also in the future will make it really hard to extract your own data because it lives with other companies. So I've seen that in past lives where we want to get access to our data, but the software vendor basically tells us no because it's already combined with these other people, and that would be a violation of their privacy. So
Mhm.
it can cause problems for you down the road as well. If you ever want to
Yeah,
hack that.
that is a huge one to keep an eye on.
Another big one to ask is, are you going to be training AI off of my data? It's
Mhm.
an uncomfortable question, but you need to ask it and you need to have an understanding of how it's going to be used.
100%. So, I mean, expand a little bit more on that, Josh. So let's say they say, yes, we are going to. What does that mean for the contractor that's evaluating the solution?
It's hard. It's very hard because our data is just our client's data, but with like our financial
Hmm.
slapped on top of it. So
Right.
at the end of the day, it makes it to where you have to go through a lot of hoops from a legal perspective to be able to accommodate that request, or
Hmm.
have some design partnerships or something in place because no one wants to be the guinea pig, but everyone wants that end product that's being pitched. So you have to be able to find a middle ground somewhere. Unfortunately, that those are things that get resolved via billable hours from lawyers and other consulting teams out there. But that's what I'm seeing most of.
Any other like hot topic questions? Maybe not hot topic, but like really important questions to ask about data before diving into solutions? Because I love this kind of little bit of a checklist here to make sure you ask before you just dive head in or head first into some of these things. But yeah, anything else that is really important to think about in that evaluation phase?
I think one easy checklist question as part of that evaluation process is just asking a potential vendor if they're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an easy measure to see if they actually care about data security and privacy and how they handle everything on the back end. Um, and then, SOC 2 also covers things like disaster recovery plan. Like these are things that you should be considering when you're picking a vendor. And that's obviously something that we prioritize. We work with customers. We tell them straight up, like, hey, this is something we have. We're SOC 2 Type 2 certified. Here's everything that we do. Um, we're fully transparent about how we operate. So that's something that a lot of people appreciate.
And
Yeah,
then for those who might not be super familiar, could you just give a quick explanation of what SOC 2 Type 2 really means or what that standard is in the industry?
Yeah. So SOC 2, so I mentioned Type 2, but SOC 2
Hmm.
is generally just like a compliance framework in which you, or I guess the vendor, would outline how exactly they handle privacy, compliance, security measures, and then vendors will typically have to go through an auditing procedure with an official auditor to make sure that these procedures are actually being carried out internally and externally with respect to protecting customer data. So it's just like a standardized framework that is typically more common in the tech industry, but I think specifically for construction, as we're talking about data, and then obviously with AI in the background, it's an absolute must-have. if you're thinking about, doing anything in that space.
Okay, awesome. We also have a convenient comment from Sean, which I'll show here as well. So SOC 2 Type 2 also covers business continuity with the company leadership. So understanding the solvency of a company is important with startups popping up. 100%.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Thanks
that's a
so much,
section in
Sean.
SOC 2. Good call.
Excellent, excellent. I think, Josh, did you have something else to add to the discussion or a thought there?
No, I mean, like another thing is like also considering data in transit as well and how secure
Hmm.
that data in transit is. So, like
Yeah.
TLS 1.2, TLS 1.3 are all, other types of ratings you can look at when you're evaluating startups.
Okay. All
Yeah.
good stuff. So we are just about maybe just under the 15-minute mark left in today's session. So reminder to the audience, any questions, comments, now's a really good time to get those in and ask anything that you want to get some feedback on from our group today. And then I want to maybe shift gears a little bit. So we talked maybe quite a bit about AI, some of the new stuff that's happening. Why is 2025, like this year, this time, the right year to really start thinking about data strategy, especially for companies who haven't yet made the investment? Because I mean, let's be honest, right? There's margins are slim in construction. It does take a lot of resources to truly invest in these systems and foundations that will help build the company. But like, why this year?
I
Yeah.
think,
Go for it,
Oh, all
Josh.
right, this is a good one. Let's
Take it
do.
away, Josh.
Yeah.
for me, I think good data strategy is oftentimes like a comfort blanket. You don't want to be tossing and turning, like wondering what if or what. You want to be able to have that information at your fingertips to help you deal with uncertainty. When I think 2025, I think headline on the news every single week. I think recovering from the pandemic when everyone was dealing with supply chain issues. I think AI readiness, AI in every single product. I feel like every single change note I read is like, hey, we're putting AI in this. Well, how are you going to get ready for that? How are you going to get ready for tariffs and all these other uncertainties that are appearing in the market? How are you going to get ready for labor shortages or other impacts caused by tariffs? That's where that blanket comes in. It helps you have an understanding and comfort as to the pulse of your projects, the pulse of your company, what potential bracing you need to do, other places you can look for comfort in your company, other verticals. Those are where you're going to find your answers. And so if you don't have the data strategy in place, you're kind of shooting from the hip in a big way, and that's very dangerous in this information driven age if you don't have information to drive you.
Yeah. One thing I would just want to add is I think with the industry is shifting. More construction firms are just investing in data capabilities. Being late to adapt can really mean losing a competitive edge. And one other important thing is that regulatory changes, compliance with sustainability reporting is really becoming more strict. Sometimes owner requests that, or OSHA, for example, for safety. So I think with all these technology advancements, the rising costs, that competition, it's really important to have a solid data strategy in place.
Yeah. And as to why 2025 is really the year you should be thinking about it, I could speak to all the conversations that I've had with executives at GCs across the country. You know, 2024, when the whole AI, conversation started to boom and and pretty much everyone's talking about it, what I've heard is the executives at so many GCs across the country start saying, how can we take advantage of this? Talking about that for the 2025 strategic plan. And so those conversations really started in 2024.
Hmm.
And people are saying, okay, what do I need to do? What is the right next step? And that next step really is solidify your data strategy, right? We've talked about so many benefits, the reasons you should have it. And that's really only going to, amplify further as you build out your data strategy. And so, honestly, my honest take is like just get started now, right? Like have a goal in mind, figure out what you want to do, but just get started. Don't wait around because everyone else, is already getting started. You're hearing it from the industry. Executives are trying to find an action plan to take advantage of. You can do it in a few different ways, but honestly, like my best advice to anyone that's listening to this and is thinking about how to convince their executives, or if you're an executive, how do you want to get that data strategy? Just get started. Um, there's plenty of resources out there that can help you get there quickly, and you can get started on a journey.
Yeah.
Barry, you're a lot nicer than I am. I would have said that 1975 would be the time to start thinking about your data strategy. 1 year after SQL released, right? It's
Yeah.
the time is yesterday. All right, so
Yeah. Definitely.
All right.
In terms of,
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ren. And then
yeah.
we have a couple of good questions, so I'll switch
Oh
over to
yeah.
your questions.
I'll be brief.
Yeah.
I think just in terms of being prepared for AI and as it continues to improve, I know we've talked about that. Maybe it's not quite there yet in having that construction specific model that gets us everything we need. But just having the data pipelines and infrastructure to support that historical tracking of data is very important. You want to start snapshotting and kind of taking that picture of where your projects are at now, so when we do have better capability in the future, and when as those models are continuing to be built out, you'll have kind of that historical source to pull from and feed through those
Yeah.
models to kind of get that insight that you want. Um, yeah, so right now is better than never.
Yeah.
Start tracking, start pulling all that data, and I guarantee there'll be some great uses for it downstream.
Yeah. It's a long-term game.
Yeah.
The sooner you start, the better off you'll be, is kind of what I'm taking out from this. All right, so a couple good questions just popping up here at the end. So thank you for participating, our wonderful audience. So this question from Sal: many technology-driven GCs are still pushing paper process when it comes to safety management. Why do you think safety is an afterthought when it comes to tech adoption? And I'll maybe start this one off that maybe the financial gains of investing in safety are maybe a little bit more hidden or harder to see, which unfortunately, that's maybe one reason why it's a little bit tougher to maybe make a clear investment, because you're kind of trying to prove a negative. Any other thoughts on this?
yeah, Sal, great to see you in the comments. I'll say that the unfortunate truth about construction is that it's oftentimes a race to the bottom, right? So, we say safety first, and the reason why we say safety first is because we're trying to create uh, a culture around why safety is so important. But the reality is that for the men and women in the field, uh, paper's a lot cheaper than buying out EHS systems. And so the other thing is that the perceived cost of change management also hits a lot of companies. Oh well, we're gonna have to go project to project. We're gonna have to do this grassroots guerrilla movement to get people off paper. It's oftentimes scary, and why not do what's working and cheap right now? And the point being that you miss out on all of the valuable safety insights that we talked about at the beginning of this call, and that we have not talked about.
All right. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think Aaron, kind of just what you're talking about earlier on this point. It's hard to point to the immediate benefit. It's a little bit hidden, but this is something that we obviously want to push forward, especially with a data-driven approach. Like, how do we make sure that safety is top of mind for everyone on the job site? When you look at other systems where you're storing data, like your ERP, right, where you're storing your financials, what you're getting, what you're invoicing, what you're getting billed for, those are all immediate things that you can sort of take action on. So I think that's just kind of the reality of it. But I do believe there's a future where everyone is going to be using digital processes to track safety, because I think that's going to have long-term impacts. That's going to lead to employee happiness as a company.
Employee happiness as a company.
Yeah.
Beautiful vision of the future.
I do want to ask Omar, because I know that at Horgan you guys are tracking different safety metrics, and your processes seem to not be manual. Do you know the history of how it got there? Is that a leadership driven change? Is that kind of just a company culture type thing? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
So it's a basically a company wide decision once we started pulling all data into centralized data lake. So what we did and what we're doing is really from manpower that Superintendent's put in for our subs and our GNA hours, and using Procore incident reporting, uh, we just do all these calculations on the database level, and that's how we get our TRIR, total recordables, lost time, our CIF rates, our DART rates that we report every year.
Hmm. Okay. So we are in the last few minutes or so of our time today. I feel like it's flown by. I do want to give a huge thank you to all of our speakers today, as well as crew, for being a big driver of good data management in construction, and also this discussion. Thank you to the audience as well. I will use one last question to help kind of close out the discussion. So this is from Jeremy. Was there anything any of you are excited to share before this webinar that we haven't had the chance to bring up yet? And maybe just keep it to like a couple words of something that you're excited about in the industry that we haven't yet talked about. And then also, if anybody who's tuning in wants to connect with you later, how can they find you? So maybe let's have Josh kick it off, and I'll just kind of go around the screen here.
Yeah, a big thing that I'm excited about. I mean, I'm in the emerging technology space is obviously agentic AI. I think that's a big thing that's going to be happening. But um, to everyone's point, it is data driven, and so if you have standard processes, if your data is available and that agent knows what to do based off of that context, it's going to be more efficient. So part of the reason why having a good data strategy is great. You're going to start to see productivity savings at that point. Right now, generative text is a lot of micro efficiencies. Agents are going to start saving a lot more time. Um, I know having worked in the field, I'm all for not having 12-hour days every day. That would be
Yeah,
awesome. So,
I'll,
exactly.
I'll keep,
And people can find you on LinkedIn, I
oh
assume,
yeah, yeah.
Josh?
People can find me
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. Like
Okay.
I wish I was a Faraday cage around me. It's the only place where you can find me.
All right. So let's go next to Ryan. Couple words on what you're excited for, and then where can people find you?
Yeah, I think the growing connectedness of the construction technology space. Every program seems to have multiple integrations now. We see that at Crew on the back end, and kind of the correlations that come from that, the ability to tie different data, cause and effect together. I think that's only going to continue to grow, how AI is going to help us with that, finding those correlations. So I'm excited to see what kind of the next couple of years hold, and how that's utilized in construction. I think, yeah, I think that's what I'm most excited for. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Feel free to shoot me a message. Always happy to talk data, get down
Yeah.
in the weeds with you. So,
Awesome. Let's do Omar next, and then we'll close out with Barry.
yeah, I'll keep it simple. What excites me like about data and construction is really building that bridge between the office and the field.
Mm.
I mean, that workflow that it can improve communication between the management and site operations. I mean, that can be through real-time dashboards, Power BI, that can give insights to both. I think that was something that really wasn't, that communication between field people and office was always a struggle. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to meet. If you have any questions, please reach out.
Awesome. And last but not least, Barry.
I think for me, when you look back the last decade, a lot of the reporting and analytics has been more static or even stale reporting, just given the manual processes that were involved. And so to see the change in how the industry is thinking about data has been really, really motivational. And now we have these tools at our disposal with all these AI models that have been released to really advance us to the next stage of data. And so that's what I'm really excited about, right? How do we take data now to look forward? How do we do predictive analytics? How do we use the data to drive actionable
Hmm.
decisions to move your company, your job, your people forward? I think that's what I'm super excited about. Really happy that we're part of this revolution to really change and optimize data management in construction. But yeah, I'm always happy to chat. I have a calendar booking link on my LinkedIn. You can also always shoot me a note or email me at barry@getcrew.com. But everyone who knows me knows I'm like a no BS guy. I'm always happy to chat about anything.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that takes us right to the hour. Thank you guys so much for sharing your insights. I know I learned a thing or two. And I hope our audience also got some insights as well. So thank you all for coming, participating. Really appreciate it. And for our audience out there, feel free to tune in to the next construction technology webinar. So we love to bring together contractors and tech providers and provide this insight into the industry. So thank you guys again.
Thanks for
Thanks,
tuning in,
Aaron.
everyone.
Thanks.
Enjoyed this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome.